So my name is Jack Hickman, and this is my persuasive speech. So I'm here to convince you that the Federal Reserve should raise interest rates. So just some background on interest rates in the Federal Reserve for those of you that are econ majors or maybe some politics majors. So the Federal Reserve is in essence a series of banks, regional banks throughout the United States. And then it is kind of headed by a board of directors, which is set in DC. So this map kind of lays out the different regions of all of that. And Howard Gold kind of gives a layout of the board of directors itself. So the board is made up of 8 voters: the chairman, who is Janet Yellen, and that's her over there, the vice chair, the president of the Fed, the president of the Federal Bank of New York, 5 federal governors, 4 Federal Reserve regional presidents. So what they do is they meet every couple of months or so, and they look at data on the economy, and they try to decide how to affect the economy in a better way, either by slowing it down or speeding it up, growth that is. And so the main way they do this is by affecting the federal funds rate. So the federal funds rate is the rate at which banks can loan money to each other and get a return on it. So right now it is currently at 0.25%, which is historically very low. So as you can see here, this is kind of the history of the federal funds rate. As you can see, since 2010, it's just really down here. It used to be super high up. And so this also affects the economy in more ways than people expect. So this is generally what happens whenever the rates are changed. So when rates are raised, borrowing money becomes more expensive. So loan rates go up, credit card rates go up, etc. But also people tend to spend less because it's easier to save. So stock market tends to go down, profits tend to go down, consumer spending tends to go down. And then when rates are lowered, the opposite is reversed. So you can see how the Federal Reserve can affect rates to kind of change how consumers spend. So my thesis is when the Federal Reserve should continue to raise interest rates steadily because the stock market is artificially inflated, currency is stabilized, unemployment has improved, and the rates need to return to normal before the next crisis. So I'm going to begin with the stock market. So the stock market, the federal funds rate tends to historically follow the stock market according to the necessity of it. So as you can see here, it tends to follow until right after the Great Recession, when the stock market is shooting up, and now it's almost over 2,000, so it's like up here somewhere, and the federal funds rate is still super far down. So why does this disconnect exist? Why does the Federal Reserve not follow the historical trends that has occurred throughout history? Actually, Ben Bernanke was quoted in an Athena Capital article of saying in this gap in 2004 that he was super concerned, so this one, yeah, right there, that the Fed needed to reserve rates to make sure the stock market normalizes. And so, why doesn't Janet Yellen have the same concern? So another big thing that the Fed is worried about is inflation and deflation. So when consumers tend to spend a lot, inflation tends to occur. So when the federal funds rate goes down, inflation tends to go up. However, in the most recent times, the federal inflation has stayed very low, even though the federal funds rate is low. So this has caused a lot of concern for the Fed. However, Caroline Baum wrote an extensive article about this for MarketWatch. And she stated inflation is something that just doesn't happen immediately. It takes almost 12 to 18 months for inflation rates to respond to the market. So if you wait for rates to get to where you want them to be, it could be too late. Then we have out of control inflation, which could cause serious issues for the economy itself. So the Fed needs to go ahead and raise rates now before this occurs. Another main thing the Fed tends to look at is unemployment. So unemployment here, as you can see, is very low. And so lower than where it was during the Great Recession, et cetera, where it peaked right there. So this is kind of Janet Yellen kind of contradicts herself by not raising rates at this time, because she was stating in 2013 in an article by Craig Goulet of Interest.com, she said that once unemployment fell below 6.5%, then they would begin to continually raise rates. Well, it was under 6.5% almost in 2013, and now it's like sitting at like 5.8. So it's definitely a time to where if they believe what they're saying, then they should go ahead and raise rates. So the biggest argument to raising rates is that we are in regular times with crisis rates. So the federal funds rate, as you say, it ups spending. So when the economy tends to slow down and people aren't spending as much for whatever issues, they don't have a job, things tend to happen, it kind of allows for a cushion for the economy itself. So now if we were to hit a crisis starting tomorrow, where do we go? We would have to dive into negative interest rates, where you'd have to pay a bank to hold on to your money, and then would cause some serious issues as well as budget deficits for the Federal Reserve. And we just need to adjust the rates back to normal before the next crisis hits. So one main counterargument, and actually is a very strong counterargument, is headwinds. So headwinds is defined as when an economy, so when other economies affect the U.S. economy. So the main one the Federal Reserve is worried about is China and Europe. So as you can see by this graph, the China GDP growth has slowed down significantly, and so has Europe's. China has had serious issues. They've had to devalue their currency a couple times to make sure it stabilizes. They've had to put in stops in their stock market to make sure their stock market doesn't crash. So they're having serious issues. However, I would tend to argue that just waiting for all aspects of the economy to line up perfectly, instead of everything else was fine but this one thing, so we shouldn't raise rates, that we should go ahead and do that. And because you're never going to find the perfect scenario to where everything matches up to what you want, and you're just setting yourself up for the next crisis. So to conclude, the federal funds rate, as you can tell, is a very difficult thing to squeeze into a 6-minute speech, but at the same time, it's a very important part of our economy. And the Federal Reserve should begin to raise rates to make sure that everything becomes back to normal before the next crisis hits, and all the different factors except for one point to this, and so it is a very good time to begin raising rates steadily. Thank you.